Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the One and All Youth Podcast. This podcast exists for us to have community and conversation about real topics. And that's what we want to have today. Today, we're going to be talking about cancel culture. But before we get into it, make sure to drop that sub. Make sure to subscribe to us, hit the bell for notifications, all the things. Leave us a review. Let us know how you're doing. If you have questions, you can actually email us at youth@oneandall.church because we want to hear from people about what's going on. But right now, I want to talk about cancel culture. And this is something that I think is so important for us to talk about, especially as Christians in a world where this is very real right now.
Yeah.
Before we get into it, for people watching who might not know what cancel culture is, how would you define what cancel culture is?
I would say it's like, I disagree with you, so bye-bye. So you out.
Dang, that was good, dude.
That's a good definition.
That's actually
Short,
that's the
succinct.
Webster's, like literally that's Webster's. We disagree, so bye-bye.
No, it's
Dang.
No,
Get
it's
out
not.
of here.
No,
Okay.
it's
I
not.
thought maybe it was like the Urban Dictionary or something.
Yeah.
No, that's the Jordan Dictionary.
Okay. But it's like you disagree about something and then now conversation over, you need to go away.
Yeah, or it's like I thought you were one way, and like, I'm just gonna give a very specific example. It's like, I don't post on my account like anything like political really. It's like, I post something one day about Joe Biden, and someone who follows me is like, oh, you're left. Okay, I'm done listening to your opinion. What you say is invalid. Your thought process, your opinions, your leadership, your character is all invalid now because of this one thing in your life that you associate with.
Right.
That's how I feel it is.
Yeah. And a big part of cancel culture too is it's not even something you say now. We're now seeing examples of this happening where someone said something 30 years ago,
400 years ago.
400 years ago,
yeah.
2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Like there's like
100%.
obviously the play Hamilton, right? People love it. I love Hamilton. You don't like it. Have you seen it?
I have, yeah.
Do you like it?
I did not like it.
You told me you couldn't get through the first like 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's true.
That means you don't like it. I like it. But anyways, there's like I saw a thing on TikTok where somebody was posting like people that you didn't know like owned slaves, for example. And it's like Hamilton did. And then people were commenting like, what? It's like, he's the worst person ever in the world. And it's like, we cancel everything good about their life by like one bad area. And it's like, you see it like, I feel like in politics, you see it a lot where it's like, whoever the candidate is or whoever the politician is, like in 1973, they did this. It was 40 years ago, but still they did it. Yeah. And whenever I see it, it makes me like question, like, am I not allowed to change? Like, do I not have permission to change my opinion on something later, or like to like repent from my actions later? Like if I was characterized by everything I did when I was 14, like, would I even be here right now?
Right.
Like have a job? Like
The answer is no.
no.
The answer no.
Yeah, it's like,
you wouldn't be here.
And that's what I feel like that's a lot of it stems from that. It's like, oh, you did this in the past or you did this recently. Doesn't matter. You did it and that's you and we're done now.
Right.
And
But I think on that though, the people who cancel culture, who go into that are the same people who like uplift it. The people who go like, oh, I like make this person a god in my eyes. So when they screw up, you like turn 180 and you go against them because they've fallen from this pedestal you put them on.
Interesting.
And so it's almost like you've gotten to such a high degree is that when they do something wrong, it almost like breaks something in you, and then you almost want to turn on them because you're hurt from it.
Dang.
So
Yeah. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, that's really good. So it's almost like we idolize people to an unrealistic standard.
Yeah.
And when we find out that they aren't perfect, we are not okay with that and we bash them. But a lot of it too is we're not even okay with people changing.
Yeah.
So whatever you say is in stone, it cannot be changed. That's what you've believed your entire life. That's what you'll always believe. But we know, I mean, even scientifically, that people change, right? Like I'm a different person than when I was 15.
Sure.
I thank God every day that Twitter didn't exist when I was 15 because of that very reason of like, who knows what I would post. I had MySpace in high school. That's me dating
Who was your
myself.
top 8? Do you know?
I don't remember my top
did you
8,
have MySpace,
dude.
Jordan?
Yes, I did. Did you?
No,
What?
no.
Oh, where'd you grow up?
I was too young.
Where'd you grow up?
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, in a place that had internet.
Yeah.
Did they though? Did
Did you have internet growing up?
no, nothing.
Like in
that.
the barn?
Maybe some dial-up at some point.
Some
but
dial-up?
Wait, you didn't have internet?
no, I had internet. Sean, come on, man.
Dude, I don't know, bro.
I could see it in your eyes. You believe that too? No,
I thought you believed that. Recently, my grandparents
it was
are from
California. Come on.
Utah. My grandparents live in Utah, and recently,
They got internet?
just last month, we were there visiting them, and my grandma was like, "Yeah, we just switched from dial-up, and we're really." I was like, "It's 2020, Grandma."
Wait, this year that happened?
Yes, this year. She's like, and I was like, someone still provides that service to them. And she was like, "Oh yeah, we just switched. It's been really fast."
They, like,
And
just
it's
got
like
a
not that
car.
fast. It's like I'm like trying to load my Instagram and it's not loading. But my grandma's getting her
They
emails
pick
in.
you up
and
in a
she's
buggy
like,
from the
Wait,
airport.
so you have dial-up, but you can still have Wi-Fi?
no, they just got off of dial-up
Gotcha.
and they just got Wi-Fi.
Gotcha.
And yeah, I was like, I couldn't believe that.
Do they have phones?
They do.
Oh.
Yeah, they have phones. They have like a really nice car. They have a great like.
We're acting so concerned. Are you
Yeah.
okay?
Like,
Do they have medicine?
Go
Like,
now? Check on them? Yeah, but luckily I didn't cancel them because I dial up. I still love
Jeez.
them, just like my
Dang.
grandparents.
way to bring it back.
Dang, dude. Yeah.
Like that, dude?
Yeah, that was good. Good segue.
But I think that's what cancel culture is. Like, we've heard of stories of people who have tweeted something a long time ago and it didn't age well.
Yeah.
And you see this a lot, even with like comedians and stuff too, where they make a
Mhm.
joke on Twitter and there's no context involved in it. Or we see just different ways that the standards change year to year.
Yeah.
Just like technology, like our standards and culture change. That as like dial-up internet is almost like offensive now. There are views just 20 years ago that are not okay now. That like large portions of the American population in particular, they held those views and now it's not okay to hold those views anymore.
Yeah.
And I think we're really struggling as a culture to come to terms with that and how to respond to that. And so, because on the other side of it, cancel culture can be a good thing
Yeah.
for like horrific acts.
Mhm.
Like I was talking to someone recently and we're talking about like Hitler should have been canceled.
Yeah,
Right? Like that's
100%.
a great example of someone who it's like, no, let's hear him out. Maybe he'll change. It's like, no,
Yeah.
we don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Consequences are way too high.
Yeah.
Let's not take a chance. Let's get him out. That's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Cancel
Yeah.
culture can be a good thing.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're seeing happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we see it. I feel like we've been seeing it in the church for a long time.
Yeah.
Like prior to it becoming like more like culture, like we've been seeing the church cancel certain people groups because of their lifestyle or their belief. And I feel like even like with like the birth of like social media and Instagram and YouTube, it's like now we started canceling like churches and pastors and like people who don't believe what we believe, like other leaders. And it's like why does the church do that? Like we should be on the other side of that. We should be, and obviously like we have to draw lines on certain things, but that doesn't mean we can't like associate or like be friends with or respect and love still other people.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm bummed because I'm looking at it as like I'm 27. I'm looking at it as like a young adult where I'm like, dang, like we kind of started the fire. Like we kind of went in this first. Because even for me, like in high school, like I can think of like I would cancel like a person or like a pastor because it was like they were Calvinist. I'd be like, well, everything that you think of is through that filter now. So I'm going to cancel you because of that. It's like, okay, or now it's like you're too charismatic. So I'm going to cancel that. Or you believe in the gifts or you whatever. So everything that you do to us is now like filtered through that. And I feel like that's how I thought before. Like now your lifestyle, your eating habits, the way you treat your family is filtered through this one thing. And I feel like, how do we come back from that now? Like, how do we move on as the church, as human beings, like from that now? Because I still cancel people.
Right.
Like easily, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a balance in it too, where there's I think some of the intentions in it are good. Like I want to hold people accountable.
Yeah.
And so like there's the good intentions and then there's the unhealthy of how far are we going to take this? Like if we found out the person who invented the car was racist, do we just stop driving cars? You know, like at what point, like, and it's how do we juggle the healthy intentions behind it with the unhealthy way you can do it?
Yeah.
And so
What's that phrase? A double standard.
double
It's like the double standard, right? It's
Yeah.
like, would you still use, like if something came out about Steve Jobs, right?
Well, I mean, I feel that there's stuff out there. But yeah.
But like if something like something major, like valid came out about Steve Jobs, like would you still
Yeah.
use your iPhone? Yes.
Right.
Like it's very convenient to cancel certain things on social media, but like when it affects my life individually, like,
Right.
oh,
You're more forgiving almost.
totally. It's like, well, you know,
Right.
I still need my car.
Right.
But it's like, oh, I'm going to unfollow you. I'm going to block you because blah, blah, blah. But it's,
because we can survive without that person.
yes.
But suddenly when that person is like, because of their things that they've done are crucial to my life,
Yeah.
now we bring context into it. Now it's like, well, let's look at the full context and all those
Right.
things.
There's grace now.
Where I
Yeah.
think you could argue that's what should happen at all times.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
how we should always be approaching people who make mistakes, who say something wrong. We should look at it in the context of what they're saying.
Yeah.
I think, you know, you talked about like this has happened for a while. This has been a problem with the church. I think one of the reasons it's ramped up, like I want to think about like how did we get here? Like how did we get here with cancel culture being what it is? And it has to be, part of it is because we have way more information now.
Yeah, for sure.
Before, there could be a church or just a person who's saying crazy stuff in Nevada or something, and we would just never know about it.
Yeah.
Before us having access to everyone's inner thoughts through things like Twitter and Instagram, or in the church world, we can watch every church's sermons pretty much in the entire world, and we can like tear those things apart. And so we have way more information. And do you think that's playing a role in like how people are canceling?
Overwhelming, because you're like, I hear both sides of it, and you're like, I don't know where I'm at on this.
Right.
And I've felt that sense of overwhelm a lot this year, where you just feel overwhelmed with everything, and you're like, I don't know what to make of this.
Yeah.
You got supporters, you get people who passionately hate it, and so you're like, this is so much information, I don't know where to actually start. And so whatever information seems to find you is what you seem to run with too. I see that a lot, where they're running with this, and you're like, where did you even get this from?
Yeah.
And you're like, have you actually listened to their side of it? Do you actually like taking in different point of views, different perspectives on it? And I think that's an area where people get stuck in a lot.
Yeah, I find myself like not believing anything.
Yeah.
On either
That's a
end
good
of
point.
things, like I find myself like as they have like COVID, right? Like COVID-19, is it real? Is it not real? Like, is it only going to affect older people or sick people, or does it affect everybody? Like, only 6% of people that have died of COVID only had COVID. The rest had cancer or whatever else. It's like, I'm like, I don't believe any of you anymore. Like, because you're all like shouting the same thing at me at once.
Right.
You're all shouting different areas of it. And it's like, I don't believe any of you, which is not good either. But it's like this jaded, like,
you get cynical.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You just stop believing.
Yeah. And I think, to give context, listening to this, someone's listening to this in 2022 and they're like, what's COVID? First off, I would love to be you.
Yeah.
Secondly,
they're 1 year old. That's the only way they're not gonna know.
But that is a great example of right now. We're recording this October 2020.
Yeah.
And that's like one of the most pressing things right now.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a danger that I don't think we think about, is what you just pointed out, of us being so cynical. What that can do is then when there really is a real issue, we're less willing to act on it or to do something because we don't believe anything now.
Yeah.
And so not only can be oversensitive be bad and canceling people without giving context to what really happened, what happens is that creates a lot of people who are just like, I'm going to stay out of it.
Yep.
But the church in particular isn't called to just be indifferent about everything.
Yeah.
Like, the role of the church is not for us to just kind of like, oh, I'll see how it pans out. They can figure it out.
Yeah.
We should be, but because we're almost like debilitated by the state of all the information, that it's hard for us to discern what we should actually do.
Yeah.
And if we're being like tricked, or if someone's, saying something that's not true and we're trying to figure out, it's so hard to navigate. Literally just last night, this is the context of when we're recording this, we just found out Trump and Melania Trump, Donald Trump, Melania Trump have COVID.
Yeah.
They just tested positive for COVID. This might be in a couple weeks when we find out, no, they didn't or something. I don't know. Who knows how the future is going to pan out. But there was like a moment where I was texting with you and Tommy about it, about how like we don't even know whether to believe this or not.
Right. Yeah.
We're talking about the president of our country right now. We're not even sure if he actually has a disease because of the current state of our culture right now. And I think that just shows why we're so susceptible to cancel culture.
Yeah.
And I think that that's some of us, but a lot of people don't have that indifference to it. They feel like they see things happening and they go full force into it and feel like they have to cancel everybody.
Yeah. You said something that sparked like a question and a comment for me, where you said something that sparked a comment and you sparked a question about like holding people accountable, right? Like, there's a good part of it. But the thing that I think frustrates me in my mind is like, is that my responsibility? Like, what am I responsible for? Because I think that we take responsibility, it's not ours, in that area. Like, somebody posted, as an example, someone posted like, someone I follow recently posted like a Stephen Furtick tweet, and they were like tearing it apart. And I responded not angrily. I was like, what is the benefit of this? Like, why would you do it? And their response was like, well, it's my job to keep people accountable. And I'm like, where does that come from? Like, why does that happen?
Also, good luck with that.
Yeah, like, have fun keeping somebody across the country accountable. But it's like, and I think we feel that, and I feel that. I'm not saying that like, I'm not pointing the finger. Like, I feel that sometimes when I see someone post something or do something, I'm like, I feel like it's my responsibility to keep them accountable. But it's like, it's your responsibility to keep like us accountable, and mine to keep yours, and yours to keep that. I think it's like, your responsibility is like within your circle, within your sphere. Right. And like, we get caught up in like, I'm going to keep everyone else accountable. I'm going to make sure that you're saying the right thing. I don't even know you. And that's where I think it stems from, is this idea that like we have this arrogance that we are responsible to keep the entire world accountable.
Yes.
And it's like, no, get over yourself.
Yeah.
Like you have a sphere. Like, why don't you spend your time focusing on that?
Well, and beyond just your immediate sphere, how about your own life?
Yeah.
I think that's the I heard a quote once, and it's like, they were talking about young people, but I think this is everybody at this point, is it's easier to try to clean the whole world than it is to clean your own room.
Yeah.
That there's something about like we see things happening in the world and we want to stop Nike from having, you know, their shops in different parts of the country where they're like taking advantage of people and labor.
Yeah.
But we ourselves don't want to change the way that we talk to someone when we're ordering food at McDonald's.
Dude.
Right? Like
Yes.
that's a very
Yes.
real thing.
Yeah.
And it almost gives us an excuse to not look at ourselves
Yeah.
and to look at everything is wrong in the world. And I think most people would say like, well, I'm not perfect, but by not addressing ourselves first,
Yeah.
like we almost like are acting like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing is too, when you try cleaning up the world and you're focused on everyone around you, you're actually diminishing your influence in that way. So your circle of influence is decreasing. And when you actually start focusing on what you can change, your circle of influence actually begins to grow. So the best way I can influence you to grow is by, if there's an area I want you to grow in, is to grow in that area myself. And so if I grow in that area, most likely you're going to see that and begin growing in it yourself. So if I actually look at myself and begin growing in areas I want others to grow in, it's going to be way more influential than focusing solely on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, and I'll just call you out for this in a good way.
Okay. I was like, and I'm out.
I should have said call out. I should have said
Dang.
like, let me compliment you.
Yeah,
We're
on
going
this.
to get real episode 1?
Yeah. What you need to change is no.
On that note. Yeah.
So if you don't know Joseph super well, man, during COVID, I feel like Joseph is just thriving right now. Like you've just like he's been super disciplined with like his reading. He's actually in school right now in a Greek class right now, like learning a lot of stuff. And by watching you do yoga, you know, I don't watch you do yoga, but you tell me.
We can cut that later. Cool.
But he stretches, works out, like he's taken serious all these things. Watching how it impacts you makes me want to do it.
Yeah.
Like it makes me want to value those things more and to do those things because you yourself are doing them first versus you come to me and say, hey, Sean, you need to stretch. Like, or Sean, like you need to read more, dummy. Like that, I just wouldn't listen to you, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that what you're pointing to is like your role of influence can be so much more impactful when you change your life because it's infectious, right? Like people see that and they're like, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And isn't that ultimately the goal of a Christ follower in the world? Being light in the world isn't shining a flashlight. It's you are the light of the world. Like you don't hold the light, like you are the light of the world. When you enter into those spaces, you start to bring light to areas and people want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's like, I feel like we, with like we said, going back and like, I feel like cancel culture has started more so in the church. It's like, we don't recognize, I think, as Christians, like how much we do influence culture negatively and positively. Like we don't recognize that, like how like we can still have a bad influence on culture by the bad habits of the church at large, you know? And I feel like my question is like, what is our responsibility when it comes to keeping people accountable? When it comes to is this person a racist or not? Or should I use my iPhone if Steve Jobs was racist or not? Or I see someone post something, it's like, what is my responsibility in that? Because is there any for me, like on my Instagram? Is there any for me outside of my circle?
Right.
I don't know.
I think the immediate thing you have to start with is your inner circle. Like I think that most of the time, if I'm in community, and this is again the reason why we should all be in community. If you know One and All Youth at all, we tell everyone constantly to be in community.
Yeah.
But I'm speaking to ourselves, like us three right here. If we are not in community, and first talking about those things in community, what I found is I don't have much extra after that to feel like I have to tell the entire world.
Yeah.
Right. I think that there's something about if I'm intentional about talking about these things, about like, hey, maybe we heard a Stephen Furtick quote or something, and we talk about that in our community, we can probably decide as a community like how we feel about that, what might we be missing, what context are we missing.
Yeah.
I don't need to tell the entire world what our conclusion was. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if the role of the church is to constantly blast out into a world that's already resonating with all the words of the entire world constantly.
Yeah.
If we need to be another banging cymbal, right, in the world, to use Paul's words. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Joseph?
I think it comes down to, how does Christ relate to culture? And so there's an old book by Richard Niebuhr called Christ and Culture. And he actually goes through these different principles and approaches of how Christ relates to culture. Do you separate from culture? Is Christ above culture? Do you see Christ through culture? Does Christ transform culture? And so there's all these different, is Christ against culture? So there's 5 different approaches that he goes through. And so I think you have to figure out, looking through biblically, through prayer, through community, and going, which way does Christ actually transform culture? Which way does Christ himself relate to culture? Which way would Christ have us relate to culture? And then that's the lens you need to view it through. And I think that's a really difficult position to take, because the church is completely divided on that. And almost denominationally, globally, from down the street church, or like every church is almost divided on like, oh, we need to transform we need to tell them what they need to believe. Yeah. And then the one's like, no, the world is evil. We need to separate from them completely and not have anything to do with them. And so you have to go through and go, okay, what do I think, or what do I believe the Bible truly says about Christ and culture and how those two work together?
Do you feel like Jesus in his time like addressed the culture of his time?
What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, I asked you first. Yeah. I think he did. I feel like not to the extent that some people take it. I think people think that Jesus, like, that was his only mission, was like address the culture of his time. But I think like to me, Jesus flipping tables in the temple is like dual focused. It's like, yes, he's addressing culture of like, you literally turn in my father's house to marketplace. But I think it's also, I think he addresses the culture of like moderate consumerism in a way of like, what do you value? What are the things that you think are important? I think him addressing the woman caught in adultery, I think that's an addressing of culture of like, they were like literally trying to cancel her life. And I think he was addressing like, no, there's a better way. So I feel like but I think some people take it this idea of like, Jesus' whole mission was to address the culture. It's like, no, Jesus' whole mission was to address your salvation and like your spiritual life. Yeah. But I think that in him doing that, it was like naturally him coming to the world and doing that and working in that way, there was like he couldn't do that and not address certain things of his time, you know? Yeah.
Well, you look at the times that I was going to say, speaking of what you're saying, I feel like no matter what, our default position as the church needs to be to build people up. Yeah. Like that needs to be our default position. Yeah. And there are moments where I think the church has to take a strong stance against certain things. Yeah. And when you look at the times that Jesus took strong stances, it was usually against organizations that were abusing people. Yeah. Right? Like if you think about that, the flipping of the tables, here's an organization that was abusing a group of people by taking advantage of them, by using a place of worship as a place to sell things.
Yeah, that's good.
Whereas every time he interacts with different people, he does so face to face. He never does. The Sermon on the Mount isn't him like calling out certain people from the from the stage, like we would from our phones on Twitter, calling out different people. Every time he's calling those things out, he's doing so one-on-one, because his default position is still to build them up. Yeah. I think that ultimately is like, 'cause I want to get into like, what are the problems of cancel culture? I think the problems of cancel culture is ultimately it's all about tearing down and never about building up. I think if you look at the story of so many people throughout scripture of God working through prostitutes, of God working through Paul, who was once Saul and killing Christians, you see God like in his story that he's weaving together. You see him using people that should have been canceled, that should have, like in our culture today, would have been canceled, but God was able to redeem them, and they experienced like the goodness of God. And ultimately that ended up changing the world because they weren't canceled, that they were actually built up to be leaders. Yeah. And I'm just curious, like what have you guys see cancel culture? Like what are the big problems? We've talked about, kind of why it's there, what it really is, but like, why is this something that we need to talk about in general? Because what are the problems of it?
I think, I really think that like it has created like a arrogance, like in our culture of like, I know better than you. I think, man, like I hate when people say things are like, you know, like it's black or white, it's one way. Like there's no gray. You know what I mean? Like, but people can't live in the gray and be like, there's more to the story here. And I feel like I find myself, and I feel like I talk like with you guys a lot about it. I find myself like seeing something on Instagram and like coming to a conclusion and not giving myself not giving that person the benefit of like living in the gray of being like, well, there's things I don't know about. My wife is so good at doing that with me, where I'm like on the road and someone cuts me off. I'm like, that person's so dumb. And she's like, do you know where they're going today? Do you know what's happening on the other side of the car?
They're on the way to the hospital
like,
right now.
It's like, do you know what they're going through? Do you know that they had a bad day? Because when you have a bad day, you're just like expect everybody to move out of your way and not care. And I feel like cancel culture stops giving people grace. It stops giving people the benefit of the doubt. Like we've removed that from the equation, and we've just said you're either for me or against me. And it's like you can be for me and not believe what I believe. Like you can be for me and not come to the same conclusions that I'm at. But I don't need to remove you from my life. But I think that we've just removed grace from the equation. We've removed understanding from the equation, and we've just like whittled it down to opinion, you know, and that's where we're at. And I think that's a horrible place to be.
Yeah.
Because like who goes on a Twitter rant and like yells at someone and then goes to bed and is like, oh, I feel good. Like that was great. Like I've engaged in like stupid Facebook, Instagram conversations that I shouldn't have. I don't feel great after. I'm not feeling fulfilled after.
Yeah.
Right. You know, but I feel like when I choose kindness, I'm like, okay, I'm having a good day today. You know?
I don't know anymore. I feel like our culture is changing. So I agree with everything you just said.
Yeah.
But I think that last part of like people don't feel good about it. I think strangely people are starting to feel good about it. I think it's there's this old movie quote that is one of my favorites, where this guy tells this kid, this really angry kid, like, all that hate is gonna burn you up, kid. We got a screensaver going on over here.
That's dope. That's cool. Anyways,
now everyone's just gonna be watching this, like, going to the corners right now. Does that work? Oh, look at that,
boom!
Dude. This is a real thing. But in this quote, there's this like really angry kid who's constantly angry, and this old man walks up to him and is like, "Hey, kid, all that hate's gonna burn you up." And the kid just looks at him and says, "It keeps me warm." Oh, and it's just like this like really heavy like thing where I think that there is something to when we attack people. They're doing that because ultimately they've lost their hope, their purpose, and by doing that, they get a glimpse of like, well, maybe my purpose is tearing these people down because it makes me feel better about myself. And that's my worry. Is not that, because I think if they would immediately feel like, oh, this doesn't make me feel good, then we would have been out of it by now. But the fact that it's ramped up means in some warped way we've rewarded that behavior. Yeah. We've actually given credence, because you look at people who are the first to call out certain people. Like one example is like Hannibal Buress. He's a comedian. In one of his acts, he mentioned Bill Cosby and the things that Bill Cosby had done. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about that, but like if you can Google it, you can find out like the horrific things that Bill Cosby did. He just mentioned it because it was common knowledge, but no one talked about it. Yeah. And because of that, he skyrocketed into a celebrity. And he now became a really famous comedian. He's in a lot of movies now. And it wasn't until he was a comic that was somewhat well known, but so it's like we're rewarding people, or tweets go viral when they have insider info to cancel somebody. Yeah. And so it's almost like we're rewarding it. And that's another problem, is we've created a structure of rewards of you feeling good about something for something terrible. Like we're only rewarding terrible things. Interesting. There's actually like it's like a stat. It's like you're 20 times more likely to get retweeted if you use certain negative words. Like Twitter came out with a study where like, and that's why their algorithm like rewards like more negative tweets and stuff. And so I think it's all you said, but it's even worse. I think that we're actually rewarding that behavior. Dang. What would you say is like a problem of cancel culture?
I was thinking when Jordan was talking, the quote that comes to mind is people are more concerned with being right than they are being loving. And so I think that, kind of going off what Jordan said, I've never heard the idea of rewarding for the negative behavior, but I also think people are just inclined to negativity. Like it's just automatic. And so it's so much easier to fall into a default of negativity than it is building people up one of positivity. And so I think those are the things too. It's much easier, and whatever's easier, we're going to do. The easiest route to take is the path we're going to go down. And so if it's easier to be negative and to tear someone down, we're just naturally going to start going down that path until we're able to
Yeah.
catch ourselves in that.
It's
And
the whole
so,
smiling and frowning thing.
Yeah.
Like frowning takes more muscles than smiling or something.
yeah.
So the rewarding thing, I think, a good example is you think of a baby. You think like Poppy at 2 years old, running around, and she hits somebody, and you give her candy.
Amen.
She hits somebody.
Amen, dude.
Amen.
Amen. That's right.
Throws a
strong girl.
Right. Throws a temper tantrum, you give her candy. We know that from child psychology, that like when you reward those behaviors, and so what you see on social media in particular, where cancel culture is, that's where it happens. That's like the marketplace, right? That's where all these things are happening, is we're getting rewarded by retweets and likes and all those things. And we're gonna have a whole episode in the future about social media and what that's doing to us too.
Yeah.
But that's why one of the problems of it is like, this is going to get worse and worse.
Yeah.
Because the reward structures are not where they should be. We don't reward somebody who gives context. Someone tweets like, well, actually the context of the statement that Stephen Furtick made is this. People say, oh, okay, and they scroll past it.
Yeah.
It's the same with like, if an article gets something wrong, if you don't know this, like watching in the news of an article, if they got information wrong, they issue like a retraction.
Yeah.
And they literally it's just a footnote. It's like at the very bottom, it's like, oh, actually we got this wrong.
We didn't mean that.
No one cares about it.
Yeah.
No one's reading the article anymore.
Yeah.
Now the other news is out there. I almost said fake news. I don't want to use that word, but like, but you know what I mean? But like this article that was incorrect is now circulating and no one sees the context because it's not rewarded for that.
Absolutely.
But I think, one of my things is, one of the biggest problems, and with social media, and you think of Twitter, it's not 140 characters anymore, right? A couple years ago, they changed it to, isn't it like 280 now?
Oh, I don't know.
Tommy? 200?
200?
Thank you. Tommy's our fact checker.
Dang.
So 200 characters is not a lot of space. That's like a couple sentences, like well worded to maybe get a small point across. And so what happens is we're not getting the full story. Like we're not getting the full story of what happened. Right. We actually have an experience of this happening. Joseph, you weren't here because it happened at San Dimas. Yeah. But there was actually a Wednesday night where we had an incident happen where just people came on our campus at like 9:15, which is like back when we were meeting. Remember we were meeting before COVID? Remember that? No, you don't remember that? But they came on campus like 45 minutes after ending. We have a safety team, and they were like, oh, there's people coming on campus. And so they went and approached them like, hey, can I help you? And it immediately blew up. Yeah. They were offended that we had talked to them. And it became this big thing. And the people who we had talked to about it were worried that we were stopping them because of their race. Because the 3 out of the 5 guys were Black. And it became like a really tense issue. And we ended up talking to the dad of the kids later on. And we talked to him for probably 30 minutes. And it was an awesome conversation. He came in real angry about it, and rightfully so. If his sons were telling him like, hey, they were saying these things, and he came and talked to our whole safety team. Ended up being a 30-minute conversation. But of course, that conversation wasn't recorded. Right? That conversation wasn't a podcast. That conversation, we ended the conversation inviting this dad to be a part of our safety team. Yeah. Just like, hey, like if you feel like we handled this wrong, will you please be a part? Like, yeah, he didn't even go to our church, and we're just like, hey, like we would love for you to help us out because we want to make sure we get this right. Yeah. There were things that they thought we said, and we're like, we actually have cameras who caught all this stuff, and like that's not what happened. We can show it to you, and it ended up really well. We ended up shaking his hand. He was thanking for us for the ministry, and we thought like, man, we just avoided this big thing. But then a couple hours later, someone posted on social media, a sibling of one of the boys that came on campus posted something. What they said happened, and it was completely wrong. Yeah. And it was an Instagram post. So it was more than 200 characters. And I read it. Someone sent it to me. And I'm reading this thing, and we have cameras. We have this 30-minute conversation with the dad where we're all good. Like we're great. Like, but there's no context for it. Yeah. And I think of the amount of times that we might be seeing, and because we now experience like that side of like, we didn't get canceled over that. It ended up dying off. Like it didn't, after that one post, like it wasn't talked about again. Yeah. But it like was really scary being in that side of it. And I think that's why I'm like pretty passionate about this, of like hearing people's stories. Yeah. At the same time, as I say that though, I'm worried that could be taken as like, I also don't want to cancel people who really are doing bad things. Yeah. And so I don't know what the response to that is. We talked about getting real though, right?
I think that you just gotta fight for people more. Like we just need to fight for people more, and like we don't like. There are some things in life that it's like that are cancelable, that deserve that. There are some things in life where it's like there's no way around this, but it's not your political opinion. Like your political opinion is not like worth like canceling you over. You know? Do we always agree?
Yeah.
You and I?
No.
Do we? I feel like we haven't. Do we always agree? No. No. Right?
No.
Like we don't like the three. Do the three of us always agree at one time? No, we don't always agree. But like we are like developing a culture where like we will fight for each other by having a hard conversation of like, why do you feel that way? Why do you feel that way? Like, how do we come to a middle ground? Like we fight for each other. And we need to do that in our lives. Like we need to have hard conversations with people in our circle. Because again, like, and I feel like we keep using as an example. I love Pastor Steven, but I can't have a conversation with him. I'm not in his circle. So he could tweet something and I don't get the context and I can't fight for him in that way. So why should I take a stance on it? Like what value does it bring to like have this opinion on something? And we think like, oh, we're protecting people. Some people would say like, well, you have to cancel something to build something new. And it's like, that's kind of fair. Like, that's kind of like we remove something to replace something, right? But it's like, the question keeps coming to me. We ask like, what can we do? It's like, I don't know what my responsibility is. I don't know what's for me. And so I'm going to focus on in my life, I'm going to focus on my people. And I'm focused on my wife and my kid and my friends and my coworkers and our leaders and our students and the people in my circle, because that's what I know I'm responsible for. That's what I know God's put into my hand and put into my life is those. God hasn't put the people across the world in my life. God hasn't put all of my followers or everyone I follow into my life, but he's put like my people in my life. And so that's who I'm responsible for. That's who I'm responsible for dialoguing with. I'm not responsible for always keeping every single person I know accountable, but I have the opportunity to like dialogue with you versus just like moving on from you. And I think that that's what we can do. It's just like fight for people, have hard conversations, and stop taking opinions on things that you don't need to, you know,
Right.
Well,
it's not necessary.
I don't know. I think on the opposite side of that, I think there's also the argument that if you have a platform and you can use it for good, why not use that? And so I do think that on the opposite side of that, there is, so like when it comes to the idea of anger, 90% of the anger you feel isn't really anger. It's like the pain behind it. The only time anger is actually the right response to something is injustice. So if there is an injustice happening, I should get angry and I should do something about it. So if I've got a platform to do something about it, I'm going to.
Yeah, but using your influence is different than like canceling something.
Yeah, but
like using.
Hold on, Jordan. I think.
Dang,
Yeah, let me finish this
don't
thought,
cancel
dude.
me right now, dude.
He's like, I'll get there.
Sorry, it got me a little fired up a little bit because I think if there is an injustice, there's an idea of, I think where we lose sight is the my truth, your truth kind of idea. And so if I'm going into a situation that an injustice happened, I have the power to do something about it. I should do something about it.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a place for that. But I think where we lose sight of it though is in our culture today, we have a your truth and my truth. And if they don't go together, it's fine. They're both real. And we lose sight of objective truth. And so in a situation where something bad happens and there's an injustice done, we should be pursuing with everything we have objective truth and what's actually real, getting their side of the story, getting the truth. And that's the best way to approach an injustice.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about like injustice and like something that's a real injustice.
Yes.
And I think I think we are called to do something about that too. I think there is a place for the church and for Christians to transform in that area and to use influence in that area. And so I think a lot of it is we just lose sight of what truth is and how to do it with grace and truth and how to go into culture with grace and truth and how to speak life and to speak truth into it and to fight for justice and to fight for the marginalized and all of that. And so I think that there's two sides of it. I agree 100% with yours.
Yeah.
But I think on the flip side, you still have to go after objective truth and reveal what's actually happening. So
Absolutely. I just don't think a tweet does it.
Yeah.
Like that's for me,
100%.
that's what I'm speaking to. Like I don't think that like my Instagram story, like I can like it's a tension, right? Yeah. Because it's like, what if I post something and someone does be like, oh, hey, I'm a racist?
Yeah.
Dang it. You know, like, but it's like, but also what if someone like reads that and it's like, oh, you think that about me because of this? And it's like, I just isolated you and now I've just lost that influence. And so I think it's where like some people, their Instagram is their platform and they can do a great job with it. And everybody else thinks it's our platform. And I think for me, what I'm just learning, I think in this season of like the like delicateness of cancel culture, I'm learning like my platform is people around me. It's not always my followers. against the people around me. And I think
Yeah.
that like I gotta speak up. If I'm not speaking, like I should be speaking up to you guys before I post it.
Oh,
right? Like I
100%.
should be telling you guys
Yeah.
about injustice before I post it. But we
Yeah.
don't do that right now.
Right.
Like we post it
Mhm.
first and then people know about it. It's like you shouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised by something I put on my story. I should live it out. That should be my
Right.
life already. But it's not the case right
I think
now.
people think they're experts in everything. And so they just go on.
Amen.
If there's something they hear, and all of a sudden they're just going to retweet it, and they have no idea what's the backstory or what's real in that situation. And so people just will jump at anything that fires them up, and they'll run with their emotions instead of looking at the facts behind something.
Well, it also, I mean, this comes back to the idea, right, that we want to clean up the world before we clean up our room.
Yeah.
Is this
Yeah.
when we post something, it now alleviates responsibility on us to actually do something in our immediate influence.
Yes.
By me posting something about what a good husband looks like, I then in some way am not loving my wife as much, right? Because it's like in some way, and we know exactly what I'm talking about. Like we
Yeah.
post something, we pat ourselves on the back, and that gets back to another way the reward system is off, is we get rewarded publicly of like, man, like Sean is such a great husband because I posted this thing. They have no idea like how I'm actually living that thing out within my marriage, you know, and
Yeah.
but the people who do are our immediate community,
Yeah.
and they can actually see those things. And I think my thing is, what do we do in the age of this is DM people more. I think that's instead of just immediately going to like publicly attacking somebody, what about talking about them first? There's actually a moment that Jordan and I had where I was kind of talking about a frustration I had with like a different youth pastor who's just very vocal on social media and stuff. And I kind of made a negative comment about them just like in our conversation. And Jordan pushed back and was like, have you even talked to them? And I was just like, oh, crap, dude. Like I hadn't even like talked to them.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you probably had moments in your own life
Yeah, I
where
was
you're
gonna
like,
say, then I probably talked about them the next day.
right, yeah,
Like,
yeah, totally. This is like something that, but it was just like, and well, one, like how cool in our relationship he can say that to me and he can push that. And that's one of the things we should be doing in our sphere of influence.
Yeah.
He didn't do that on social media. You know, he didn't then like attack or whatever. He like in conversation, I think in the same way, when we reach out to people personally, that really changes. Like if you want to get the context and the full story, you can reach out to them.
Yeah.
And like oftentimes what I found is when there are cancel things happening, usually those people are trying, if they're like in the right and they're getting like misrepresented, they've usually made a statement about it. And they've usually like, cause they're trying to clear their name, they'll bring out all the evidence, but no one looks at it.
Yeah.
And like, but sometimes you'll look for it and there's nothing and you're like, okay, maybe they were supposed to get canceled, right? Like,
Yeah.
but in a lot of contexts, like you search it, you know, and you can find what the full story is. And I think something we keep talking about, I think would be good to clarify is we keep talking about gray area and like understanding that there's a gray area. And I think some people hear gray area and they think like, oh, there's no truth then. Like, oh, gray area is like, oh, well, we don't know what's really right, so let's just not do anything about it. But I think that's actually not what gray area is. To me, like I've always viewed gray area as like being in the car, not knowing the full context or not knowing if you're actually right.
Yeah.
Me, like understanding that the gray area on certain issues is that to have a humble posture.
Yeah.
And for you to say like, I might be wrong about this.
Yeah.
And so it's not like a gray area is like, there is no truth, like do whatever you want. It's like, I'm humble enough to say on specific issues, there are some things that as Christians, we're like, no, we're very sure on this.
Sure. Yeah.
And there isn't a gray area on certain things.
Absolutely.
But a lot of things, it's like hey, I'm going to hold on to this kind of loosely because this is a gray area, meaning I might be wrong about this. Like I might be wrong about this. And I'm trusting that you're reading scripture just like I am and you're coming to a different conclusion on these like different issues. So does that make sense? Like I think that's important in this conversation in canceling is understand what gray area is.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things we could do about it is like stop forming opinions and start like asking questions.
Yeah.
Like when you DM someone, right? Like I think because anyone can take that and be like, oh, well, I just got permission I'm gonna light you up now.
Right.
But it's like,
yeah, don't light them up in their DMs.
yeah, like let's ask questions. Let's like, hey, how did you get to this conclusion?
Right.
There's a friend of mine who is like, we politically we're on very opposite sides of the spectrum. And like I posted something and he responded to it. And I saw his name and I was like, dang, I'm about to get lit up right now. Like I'm literally about to get like roasted. And he was like, hey, really quick, like, I just want to know, like, why do you think that? And I was so like encouraged by this person, like just literally like asking me a question. And we dialogued for probably 2 hours after that, like on the phone. And it was just like, oh, like we don't agree And I for sure thought you were gonna just like, boom, you're stupid, you're done. But he was like, and he would bring like literal, like we would have like thoughtful conversation about like, well, this, but then also this. Okay, well, you're right, but this, and it was just like, dang, this is how it should be.
100%.
And this is how, but it's like, but prior to that, I'm seeing this guy post stuff, and I'm like, come on, bro.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I'm canceling in my mind, and
You
it's like, well,
immediately
you just reached out to me and we did this.
Yeah.
So I think just like we gotta ask more questions.
Yeah. Well, I think
100%.
Sean, you use the term bridge building all the time. Like you need to be able to build bridges to these people. You need to be able to actually hear their side of it. You need to be able to listen to understand before you start speaking. And so I think that's a huge thing. Behind it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like we covered all the stuff we wanted to do.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Any last words you want to add?
Me and Joseph love each other.
We do. I do. No. This is why we can talk about things like this. And so.
Dang, but you don't love me.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for watching, guys.
But honestly, hey, great first episode. Awesome talking about this. Remember, subscribe, hit the notification bell, follow, whatever. Hit us up on IG if you have any questions about anything. But ultimately, email us at youth@oneandall.church if you have questions that you want us to talk about. If you disagreed with all the things Joseph said, let us know. Yeah. And we would love to correct them.
I'd love to argue with you. No,
if you do have a
love to
disagreement,
cancel
though,
you,
you could email rory.eldridge@oneandall.church. And
he would love to respond to that.
Yeah, here's his actual phone number. Actually,
but dude, it's awesome being in community, you guys. Awesome to have a conversation with you about a very real topic.
Yeah. Thankful for this space where we can actually dialogue and be real.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have those conversations.
The One and All Youth Podcast.
Boom.
Did we even say that yet? Did you say it? I think we said
it
it
on
on
the screen.
Did we say
If
it?
you're watching.
Yeah, I mean, you read it. The One and All Youth Podcast.
See you guys next time.